Hey boys and girls, today's math lesson is adding fractions with unlike denominators. So I have here an example. I have 7/10 plus 1/2. So it was easy when the denominators were the same because we just added the numerators, kept the denominators the same, and then simplified. So we have to add another step to this. So we have to find an equivalent fraction to 1/2 that has the same denominator as this fraction. I always look at the bigger number and then change the smaller number. So I say, what do I have to do to 2 to get 10? Well, that's easy. I multiply by 5, right? Multiply by 5. And we know that in fractions, whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. So I'm going to multiply by 5. So my new equivalent fraction is going to be 5/10. So now I can do 7/10 plus 5/10. And 7 plus 5 is 12/10. So now I'm left with a improper fraction that I have to turn into a mixed number and simplify. So if I remember my improper fraction rules, it's how many times does 10 go into 12? And that is 1 time. And then 10 minus 12 leaves 2 left over, and 10 remains the denominator. Now 2/10 is both even, so I have to divide by 2, and I get 1/5. So my final answer is 1 1/5. So 7/10 plus 1/2 equals 1 1/5. That's a lot of steps to get to that point. So it's really easy to get lost in this process. So take your time, remember what you have to do, and just take it one step at a time. So I have 1/4 plus 3/8. Okay, so I have 4 and 8 as my denominators. 8's the bigger number. So what do I do to 4 to get 8? I times it by 2. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 1 times 2 is 2, 4 times 2 is 8. So now I have 2/8 plus 3/8. 2 plus 3 is 5/8. This one's nice and easy. There's no simplifying because there's nothing that 5 and 8 have in common. So that's a nice, easy example. And right now I'm just looking at the examples on page 308. Page 308 does tell you that in order to find your unlike denominators, you want to use the least common multiple to rename the fraction. And that's just the same thing as saying, what do I do to my top number to get the one fraction to get the other fraction? It's the same thing. It's finding that least common multiple. It's just using your knowledge of facts. Okay, so now I'm going to do 4/6 plus 1/3. So you can ask yourself, what's the least common multiple? It's 3. I'm sorry. I just had a blank moment there. I'm going to go back. So I have 4/6 plus 1/3. What do I have to do to 3 to get 6? I have to times it by 2. Oops, sorry. I don't want to do that. I want to do this right here, times 2. Sorry, I don't want to restart the video over every time I make a mistake, so you're just going to have to bear with me just like you do in class. Okay, so obviously 4/6 stays the same, and you don't have to move that over, but I like to keep things lined up. So now I have 4 plus 2 is 6 over 6, and we know that any number over itself equals 1. Okay, and then one more example, 3/4 plus 1/12. Again, I think the simplest way to think about this is, what do I have to do to 4 to get to 12? Times it by 3. Whatever I do to my denominator, I have to do to my numerator. So I have 9/12, and then I just bring over my 1/12. So 9/12 plus 1/12 is 10/12. It's not improper, but they are both even, so I can divide by 2, and I get 5/6 as my final answer. And that is how you will add fractions when one denominator can be changed to make an equivalent fraction for the other denominator. Now, sometimes you have to change both denominators, and that is really where least common multiple will come into play for those. So here's page 309, and I'm going to do a few of those problems, and then I'm going to give you the answers for as many as you want. Well, I'm going to give you the answers for all of them. You can do as many problems as you need to until you feel comfortable with this before you move on to the worksheet. 6/8 plus 1/4. Now, I do want to say that I know that sometimes moms and dads want to correct your work. And while I appreciate them wanting to correct your work to make sure you're doing things right, I still have to give you a grade at the end of the quarter. And so it will be helpful to me if you turn in your work without moms and dads correcting it first. Okay? That way, if I decide I want to give a grade for an assignment, I can give a grade for it. But it also just helps me to see what you're having trouble with, so that I know if I am ready to move on to the next lesson, or if I should stay and do a little bit more practice on something. So I appreciate moms and dads wanting to help and wanting to correct things, but I'm asking respectfully that they do not, so that I can get a good sense of where you are at with your math, just like when we're in class. Okay? So here I have 6/8 plus 1/4. I'm going to change my 4 to an 8 by multiplying by 2. So I have 2/8 plus 6/8. 6 plus 2 is 8/8 equals 1 whole again. All right, 1/3, 5/12. I'm going to change my 3 and then get 4/12. And then I'm keeping 5/12. I have 9/12. 9/12 has 3 in common. 3/4 is the final answer. Okay, so this was 1, this was 2. I'm going to do number 3 now. Number 3 is 2/3 plus 4/9. I'm going to change my 3 by multiplying, and I'm going to have 6/9 plus 4/9. That's going to equal 10/9, which is improper. 9 goes into 10 one time, with 1 left over. So 1 and 1/9. And number 4 is 1/5 plus 5/8. I'm sorry, 1/2, not 1/5. 1/2 plus 5/8, so I'm going to times 4 times 4, and you're going to get 4/8 plus 5/8 is 9/8 equals 1 and 1/8. Okay, so at this point, I would suggest that you pause the video and do a few problems on your own, and then come back, and I am just going to hold my phone over the answers for 1 through 20 so that you can see the answers for 1 through 20. You can pause the video to correct your work, and then if you did the problem solving, there's your answer for the problem solving. And then if you decided to go on and do some remembering, there's your answers for the do you remember at the bottom. You didn't have to do that, but if you did, great. So again, here are the answers for that page. You should do as many examples, or should have done as many examples as you needed to until you felt comfortable. and then you can do the worksheet when you're ready. Ciao for now.